Hello, and welcome to another episode of Chatting with Charlie. The topic today is going to be love, more specifically, self-love. And what does it mean to love yourself? What are the expectations? And also, is self-love something necessary, maybe even vital? So I'll start with something very basic, but something that I think is important for the whole discussion, and that is, what is love? So we had a very long discussion, I talked to myself for 30 minutes what love is, and there I was mostly referring to romantic love. But I did something today that I didn't actually do last time, and that is I took a dictionary and I looked up what the definition of love is. So the formal definition of love by Merriam-Webster is a feeling of strong or constant affection for a person. And I think this is quite a good definition if we're talking about self-love, because so we have strong or constant affection for a person. So if we see self-love as something that is exactly that, so affection for ourselves. So I think before I get into it, I'll tell you why I started thinking about this topic and why I believe it to be a fairly important and also very interesting conversation. So, not that long ago, I went to my psychiatrist for an appointment, and I'm not quite sure how we actually got into this, but she asked me what my 3 most important values in life are. She told me I've got to imagine I've got a child, and she took this ridiculous, hideous panda, and it was sort of a stuffed animal, and I'm not sure what it was doing there in the office, and I was... I don't know, it was a very ugly panda, so it was hard to imagine that it was my child. I hope to think that my child would be not as weird as this panda, although even if they're weird, I'll love them. Anyway, so she asked me what my 3 most important values or sort of life philosophies are that I would give on to my children. And I think for me it's quite easy, because I feel like I know fairly who I am. But this is a question that actually I think is very, very interesting, and I would love to hear everyone else's points of view. So please, I think you can actually comment it on Spotify. I'll make a question box, and also feel free to text me on the socials. I would be very interested in what you think. What are your 3 most important life philosophies? What would you say to your child if you can only reduce it to 3 things to live by? And anyway, so I didn't have to think about it for a very long time, and she was actually quite impressed, because she said she has never had anyone who was actually as clear at what they think is important. But then she also said some other things, which we'll get to later, but I'm sure now you're curious, or maybe not, but I like talking, so I'll share with you my 3 most important life philosophies. So the first thing that I said was, always stay true to yourself and your values. Don't be swayed by what other people think. And by this, I'm not saying that, you can't learn and you can't change your opinions or anything. That's not what I'm saying. But stay true to your values and your ethics and your idea of right and wrong, and don't do things just because other people say you have to. Then the second thing I said was, stay willing to learn and open for criticism. So I think that's fairly self-explanatory. Again, obviously, I'm not saying that you should, that you can't speak up if someone's doing something that isn't right to you, or if someone is, There's a difference between like constructive criticism in situations where it's necessary and people just being bullies. But again, here referring to constructive criticism, even though it's really hard, I think accepting criticism is one of the most difficult things, and not taking it personally is really, 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 really hard. And that's why I think that's something that I would give to my child, that we work on that from a young age, that, criticism isn't something that's inherently bad, and that we should want to learn and improve and change our opinions and change things that we've said and things that we've thought. And the third value that I said, the third like life philosophy is do what makes you happy, because even if other people think it's stupid, because if it makes you happy, then it's not stupid, because then it's fulfilling a purpose, and that purpose is to make you happy. And I think she thought that was a lot deeper than what I actually meant. I think people are giving me more credit than is due. I was sort of thinking about how much I love stuffed animals, and that my girlfriend and I collect Jellycat stuffed animals. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're very sweet. Look them up. No product placement here. I wish it was. I wish I could say I was sponsored by Jellycat in an episode about self-love. That'd be quite good, but I'm not. But they are very sweet. And I was thinking about that sort of there's this expectation that adults aren't really supposed to have stuffed animals. And actually, they're really cute. And they're very comforting. And they're very soft. So that's more what I was thinking about. I think she thought that I was talking about deeper things than I actually was, and giving me more credit than is due. But exactly, so those were the three things that I said. And then she asked me, okay, so I've said I've got to stay true to my values, and asked me what my values are. So I said some things like we should be kind to others, we should be understanding, we should give people, trust and respect, and that I try to see the best in people and be apologetic if, I try to give them the benefit of the doubt, innocent until proven guilty sort of thing. I said that everyone deserves human kindness and decency, everyone deserves respect, equal rights, all that sort of stuff. So we didn't have an insanely long discussion about all of my values, and I think this episode might be too long if I talk about all of my values, but that's sort of the general direction it went into. And then she said, okay, so you said you've got to be kind to others, but you're lying. You told me you have these three most important values, and value number one, or not values, but these philosophies, and philosophy number one, you're a liar. And I looked at her and I said, excuse me, I am very kind to others, I hope. And she looked at me and I said, yes, I'm not disputing that. I'm not saying that you're not kind to others. And I was really confused, and I said, I'm sorry, have I said something insensitive? Have I done something wrong? And then she said, no, but you've been here with me for several months, and you always put yourself down, and you are not particularly nice about yourself. And I sort of looked at her and I said, well, that's different, isn't it? I'm different. I don't deserve this sort of same amount of respect and that. And then she said, well, no, you are lying then you are not living by your own philosophy, and how can you say that's the most important thing if you are not living by it yourself? And I sort of put it at the back of my mind and went on with the session, and then went home and didn't really think about it that much until, as you do, one night I was lying in bed, not able to sleep, and I sort of thought, wow, I guess she's right. I do treat myself differently than how I treat others. And then we looked at my other philosophies, and we sort of did a similar thing. We agreed that I I do value other people's criticism and that I am open to learning, but that I don't do things that make me happy. Although I thought, well, I have the cuddly toys on my bed. But she said she doesn't see me doing very many things that make myself happy. So here you have a very private, I don't know, window into my life, I guess. But no, thinking about these things, I think it's a very, very common phenomenon that we're our own worst critic, that we, will see the smallest of mistakes and in our mind, we'll inflate these mistakes and see them as something awful and something drastic and something, I don't know, we'll look at our every failure, and I think many people sort of see themselves in a very different light than the people around them do. And obviously there are people who are the exact opposite, who think they are wonderful. But I have the feeling here that lots of people sort of go in extremes. So either that they're incredibly full of themselves, or that they don't like themselves at all. And I have the feeling that this is a bit of a sort of a social phenomenon, and that there's almost an expectation that has to be met. And I feel like this expectation is that self-love is something radical. It's seen as selfish, and it's conceited, and it's bad. And well, really, you're supposed to hate yourself, because where would we be if we liked ourselves? I'm sure many of you have seen Mean Girls. If you think about the situation where, I've forgotten what her name is, but I've forgotten everyone's names. There's Katie, there's, what's her name, Regina, and the other ones. But it doesn't really matter. They're all standing in front of the mirror, and I'm sure I'm going to be torn to shreds here by people who love Mean Girls and are saying, how can you not even remember their names? So I'm very sorry about that. But I can't think of their names. But also my mouse is broken, so I can't Google because I can't record and use a mouse at the same time. So I am sorry. But anyway, they're looking in the mirror, and one of them, I think she says she doesn't like her knees or her ankles or something that, most people wouldn't even consider. And then Katie says, oh, well, in girl world, everything's different. I thought there was just fat and skinny, but it turns out there are lots of things you can hate about yourself. And I feel like that's almost the expectation that you're not actually supposed to like yourself. And obviously lots of things play into this. So everyone always wants to talk about magazines. Well, not everyone, but it's sort of the topic, isn't it, for writing essays, even though magazines are sort of not really that en vogue anymore, or at least not as important as they once were. But it's more than just social media. I mean, the dieting industry is a $1 billion industry, and then there's so many books for self-growth and self-improvement, and I think it's easier to actually, win over people if you make them believe that there's something wrong with them in the first place, because obviously we can always get better, but if I think that there's nothing wrong with me, or if I think that I'm good enough, then I'm less likely to buy into these things. And if I think there's something wrong with me and my body, I'm much more likely to go on a diet and do whatever, do a juice cleanse and spend my money on all of these ridiculous products, because I think that there's something wrong with me, and that someone has given me this idea that there's something wrong with me. And then obviously social media and that, it does play into it. The amount of Photoshop that we see, and Instagram isn't the reality. I mean, as much as we know these things, I still think it's important to reiterate them, because on the one hand, it is we do have to say it like a broken record, so that everyone sort of groans and we think, yes, we know that. But then when we're standing in front of the Instagram mirror of truth, we can still put ourselves down. So I feel like there is this almost pressure that you're supposed to hate yourself. But then it's not allowed to go far enough that you have a sort of genuine self-loathing, because at the same time, there's a certain amount of confidence that you have to have. So you're supposed to secretly hate yourself. No, you're supposed to publicly hate yourself, but secretly be quite confident and be able to portray yourself as confident and sort of know when to say, oh, I hate myself, and then everyone else has got to say, oh no, but you're so pretty, and all of this stuff. And we have these weird practices almost of, someone puts themselves down. I don't know how often I say, in this podcast. I'm very sorry. And then actually, I keep apologizing for ridiculous things. My girlfriend is giving me very dirty looks. She told me the story that she read somewhere where someone's therapist, every time they apologized for something ridiculous, would stand up and go, fuck! And my girlfriend told me she was going to do that for me every time I apologize. So in lieu of Anya, I'll go, fuck, here for all of my listeners. But actually, here, sort of, I'm doing exactly what I talk about. I mean, a lot of my humor is self-deprecating, and I like self-deprecating humor. I think it's funny. I think it's funny when other people do it, and humor as a bloody hell. Sorry. Humor as a coping mechanism is completely valid and wonderful. But yeah, we do sort of get into the habit of apologizing for things where we just don't need to apologize. And it's very easy to put yourself down and sort of then to be stuck in this picture of, well, I'm shit anyway, so everything that's shit that happens to me, I deserve. And then it can be a downward-facing spiral. So, yeah, that's how I got to the topic of talking about self-love and what I think about self-love. And I think it's really difficult because, so on the one hand, we have this pressure from the outside. But then on the other hand, we read all of these, so we have the other side. Everyone the inspirational Instagram and that is very much very, very popular and sort of everywhere. And, everyone's saying, oh, you're wonderful just the way you are, and you're great, and you're an inspiration, and you need to love yourself, and you need to do this and this and this and this in order to love yourself, and you have to feel this, and you have to do this. And so we do have the other side, where now it's becoming fashionable in some circles to love yourself, which again is obviously a good thing. It's good to not despise of yourself, but you might have noticed I said you have to do this, you have to think this. And I think that is another great problem that we face, that even in this sort of idea of self-love, there is a very fixed idea of what it means, of what self-care is, of what self-love means. And it's something that's very personal to each and every individual. And that's why I like the definition of the feeling of constant affection for someone. Because, what affection is and what affection means is something very, very personal. And it should be that way with self-love as well. And that's why this narrow box that all of the inspirational Instagrammers portray more or less in the same way can also be quite damaging, because it puts pressure on you to love yourself in a certain way and to think about yourself in a certain way, which might just not align with who you are as a person. So if we go back to the statement, you are lying by not living your values, and me thinking about it in the middle of the night, I must say it hit me quite hard, and it's something that I've thought about a lot, because she's not wrong. It is true that most people that know me will probably notice that I'm not a great fan of myself. I seem very confident to the outside. I've heard this from a lot of people, actually, when they meet me, that they think that I'm incredibly tough and that I don't know, this really strong person and that I'm really outgoing and confident. But then you meet me and you quickly notice that's not the truth at all. I just conduct myself in such a way that people, have lots of false assumptions about me. So it did really hit me being told that I'm lying to everyone, because honesty is one of the things that I preach, that you should be honest about your feelings and your thoughts and your hopes. And that was one of the inspirations why I'm making this episode that is quite vulnerable, because I don't think it's lying as much as not being able to do something. And it's a growth process and a learning process rather than actively lying, because I'm not doing it to cause malice or whatever, but in my brain there's just this distinction between myself and others. And I know this from lots of people in my in my friend group and people who I've talked to, that they can't see themselves in the same light that they see others in. And it can be something very important sort of for our own journeys to try and see ourselves the way other people would. And this is something that I've learned in the therapy sessions. Whenever I'm asked to say something nice about myself, I'm kind of lost, and then I'll sort of sit there looking, pretending I didn't understand the question. And then I was asked, pretend that I'm my girlfriend. So pretend that I'm Anya, and then say what Anya thinks about me. And then no one's really been happy with the answer, so I'm sure she hates me anyway, because everyone said, no, actually, you've been together for quite a long time and you have a very healthy relationship. You can't tell me that she actually hates you. So what does Anya say about you? And this is an activity that I would recommend to lots of people. What would your partner or your best friend or someone who loves you dearly, what would they say about you? How would they describe you? And what would they say are your best features if you can't think about it in terms of in your own terms? So getting back to the lying, so it isn't a malicious thing. It isn't something that's done to cause others harm, but the one comment that you can't act as a role model is true. So I don't have children yet. I mean, I have 2 cats who I refer to as my children, but I don't think my cats can learn a lot from me. I think I could learn a lot from them. I could learn from them how to relax, because they are incredibly good at relaxing. No, so, oh dear. These awkward jokes, hey. God. I don't know if anyone actually finds me funny or if I just find myself funny. See, that's something positive that I can say about myself. I think I'm funny. I don't know if anyone else thinks I'm funny. But it doesn't really matter, does it? If I think I'm hilarious and I can laugh at myself, then it's wonderful. I've got my favourite comedian with me at all times. Trying to fill the awkward silence because I'm confused about my notes. I have notes, but they are sort of a bit chaotic, the way most things that I do are. But I wanted to have this as more sort of a fluent conversation and not a reading off of notes, because I think that one point flows into the next quite nicely. So, sorry. There's that saying, isn't there? Do as I say, not as I do. And I think we all know people like that. Often those who give the best advice are those who absolutely don't live that way and don't follow their own advice. And practice what you preach is something that is important, particularly if you have sort of influence on other people, be this as a parent or a teacher or a friend, whatever. I think if you're telling people how they should be living, but not living this themselves, it can be hard, because we learn our most important values through those who are closest to us. And if we see someone always putting themselves down, then we will soon accept this as the normal thing to do and as the necessary thing to do. And then it can be passed on from generation to generation, from person to person. The normal state of things, the necessary state of things, is the state of self-loathing. And it definitely shouldn't be that way. I mean, not loving yourself, not actively loving yourself, and actively hating yourself, I would say, are two different things. And I would say, just because you don't love yourself, that doesn't make you mentally ill. That's not what I am trying to say here at all. But it can be very difficult if we do develop a mental illness in the course of our life, and we have a crisis of hope and a crisis of self, and everything seems completely lost. Then the easiest thing to hate is yourself, and that can make recovery so much harder. It can make carrying on so much harder, because if you hate yourself, if you can't see any worth in yourself, then, well, what's the point of recovering, and what's the point of even getting better, because you feel like you don't deserve it anyway. So if we go through our life hating ourselves, then it can make us more it can make us maybe be more affected by some things. And that leads me to my next point, which I think is something that can be difficult, is actually dating. Dating is already hard enough as it is. There are so many expectations that you have, but also what's expected of you. And there are so many things that can make dating a lot harder. And we always hear, or I don't know if it's we always hear, but what I've heard a lot is you can't truly love others until you love yourself. And this is a quote that I absolutely hate, and I absolutely starkly disagree with. And that's why I'm still kind of troubled by the thing that my psychiatrist said, because as much as I do agree that it can have a role model function, people who hate themselves, they don't want to hate themselves, and it's often people who hate themselves the most love others the most and want everyone else to be happy and healthy. And then so we have this duality. So on the one hand, they're not practicing what they're preaching because they're not being kind to themselves. So they're teaching others that inevitably they will be sort of miserable if they hate themselves, but that hating themselves is normal. But so many things can cause us to not love ourselves, and there are so many situations where we blame ourselves for things that go wrong that are completely out of our own control. And saying that someone more or less doesn't deserve love just because they have a difficult time with themselves or because they're struggling is something really, really problematic, because of course I can love other people even if I can't love myself. Now, this isn't to say that not loving yourself doesn't add some maybe more difficult nuances to a relationship. Because if you don't love yourself, it can be harder to accept other people's love. Because if you see yourself as the villain in your story, if you see yourself as, the root of all evil, and then you have a person in your life who maybe you adore greatly, and you love and you think is incredible, and they see you the same way, and they tell you and show you they see you the same way, it can be really hard to believe. It can be really hard to believe that they could love you, because how could they? I mean, everything about you is shit. And that's something that I have learned, or I've experienced since dating my current girlfriend. I'm a fairly insecure person, and I'm, I saw a quote somewhere the other day where I thought was quite fitting. It said, I found the solution to my anxiety. Everyone just needs to reassure me they don't hate me every 5 seconds for the rest of my life. And as much as I giggled, it's true for many people that they become dependent on the affection of others. And this is obviously something where self-love is, important, so that you don't become emotionally dependent on other people. Because if you can't see any value in yourself and you need someone to constantly validate you, then you will probably become emotionally dependent on people, which can then scare them off. And also, even if it doesn't, it can cause very unstable, very toxic situations, unhealthy dynamics, and is all in all probably not a good thing. And yet still, even someone who is struggling with themselves deserves love. And there can be additional difficulties in these relationships, but I don't think that it's something that isn't manageable. If you truly love the person who is having difficulties with themselves, then I think this is something that you can stay together through, and that you can manage. And I mean, I'm not a therapist. Nothing I say here, has any diagnostic or any, I'm not saying it's what you should do or that it will work for you. But what I can say from my own experience is loving someone so incredibly much, like I love Anya, was, for me, it was like a catalyst. It was a motivator to embark on this journey of accepting myself a little bit more. When we met, I was in the depth of an eating disorder, and I was lucky enough to be able to recover mostly on my own. And for me, the main event was I want to show her that I can be sort of self-sufficient, and that I can do this, and that it's worth it, so that I can live my life again. And please don't get me wrong, I'm not saying here that a relationship will cure any mental illnesses, anything. There are lots of other things, lots of other positive influences in my life, and so please don't say that I'm telling you that a relationship can cure everything, because this is also things that I've heard even from medical professionals that have said, oh well, you just need to get in a relationship and then everything will be wonderful. And I can assure you that this is not true, and that is not a good or helpful thing to say to anybody. But also, if you're having troubles on your own, a relationship, it might mask some of the problems, but it definitely won't cure you, and it won't make you happier in yourself, and it won't make you more confident. But what I can say is, for me personally, just loving someone so deeply, and also being shown that they love me every single day, waking up and being shown by words and by actions how much I'm loved, made me sort of question if, maybe they had a reason to not hate me, and to investigate a bit deeper and to think about, so what are some things that maybe I'm good at, and what are some things that I can do? Once I went on a date with someone, And we're lesbians, so dates have to take, multiple days, and you have to talk about all your trauma, otherwise it wouldn't be a lesbian date. Again, jokes aside, stereotypes here for my my heterosexual listeners. No, that's a lesbian stereotype, that queer dates take a very long time and that you sort of overshare immediately. But yes, not today's topic. So we went on this date and we were talking and it was all quite nice. And then suddenly this person told me, well, you're not ready for a relationship. You need to work on yourself. You need to fix yourself. And then when you fix yourself, you can start thinking about dating others. And at that moment, I was very vulnerable, and I went home and I cried and I thought, what is wrong with me and why do I need fixing? And now in retrospect, when I'm a bit older and a bit more experienced, I don't think that was a good interaction. I think the core of what they were saying was that I was sort of trying to attach myself to other people to feel less insecure, and I believe that is true. But you can't tell someone they are not worthy of love and of a relationship just because they're having a hard time with themselves. It's completely valid to say, I cannot cope with this situation. I cannot cope with someone, who doesn't value themselves at all. This is not something I want. So establishing personal boundaries is always something that's very important. And I think being able to establish boundaries, that is an act of self-love. I don't think that self-love is looking in the mirror and thinking, bloody hell, I'm gorgeous. It's great if you have days and instances where you look in the mirror and think, bloody hell, look at that banging bod, look at that sexy chick. Yes, go get some. It's good to feel confident and to feel, physically confident and that. But self-love goes much deeper than that. And it's about much more than not hating your appearance. It's about knowing who you are as a person and feeling secure enough in your identity that you don't feel the necessity to change or to pretend to be someone that you're not. Self-love is accepting who you are, but also being able to sort of accept the things you can't change and change the things you can't accept. No. Oh dear, I seem to have a whole load of motivational quotes in this today. No, but I do think that, accept yourself and accept who you are and accept what you like and accept your quirks and don't see them as something negative, but also, yes, loving yourself means being willing to learn and being willing to admit that you're wrong. And loving yourself is being able to set boundaries and to say, no, actually, this is not what I want. This is not what I'm able to do. Just being able to say no. That is an act of self-love. Being able to be authentic and to be honest with other people, even when it's quite difficult, that is an act of self-love. Thank you very much for listening to me sort of ranting about self-love and what self-love is. As always, I'll leave my socials in the description box below. I would be very happy if you checked out my socials and if you followed me. And yes, so the listener question, we talked before about the life philosophy, so I'd be very interested in what is your life philosophy, and then also tell me, what do you think? Is self-love necessary? Is self-love good? Is self-love bad? And what does it mean to truly love yourself?